Hello everyone and welcome to another PCGamesN news video. Ben Barrett here, joined by Mr. Richard Scott Jones, which must mean we're either talking about space or Total War. You nailed it on the second one. It is in fact Total War. New announcement from Creative Assembly today, hopefully a few minutes just before you started watching this video, is Total War Sagas. It's a kind of a new type of Total War game.
Right, yeah, this is a historical spin-off series of Total War games which will focus on what they're saying is powder keg moments in history, sort of short periods, at the least a few months, at the most a few decades, where history could have gone either way and everything was really at stake. They say it's going to be similar in size and scope to the Fall of the Samurai DLC for Shogun 2. That dealt with the Meiji Restoration and the end of the Bakumatsu period, which was the last feudal shogunate. Right. So that lasted roughly 15 years, focused entirely on Japan, had sort of 10 factions at play across two clans.
Single countries or single areas of the world, limited number of factions, limited number of years. Have they said anything so far about what the first one might be?
They say that it will continue on from Rome 2 and Attila and present a new challenge in a focused geographical area. So the the DLC that attached to Attila dealt with the Goths and the fall of the Western Roman Empire, which is occurred towards the end of Attila's own ransacking of the Western Roman Empire. So all sorts of exciting and interesting things were happening in Europe after that. Yeah,
so what we've done is we've come up with 5 ideas for Total War Sagas.
Yeah.
Ones that we think would, fit the theme and that we want to see Total War games in. We'll kick off with number 5. We're going to count up. Oh yes. Unification of England.
Yes, so this is one of those interesting things that was happening all over Europe. They could go anywhere, but the Unification of England, this would deal, in theory, with Alfred the Great and his wars defending the English mainland from ransacks and raids by the Vikings. It also dealt a lot with sort of unifying the various counties and disparate Saxon factions in England at the time, so plenty of politics going on there.
So it'd be kind of semi-medieval, semi-Rome, right?
Yeah, sort of Dark Ages stuff, which is why I say that it would fit in snugly in that period just after Attila and its DLC. Okay,
sure. So we feel like that's probably a good shout for what they might do first, but
maybe
we're also, experimenting here. Number 4, Vietnam.
Yeah, so this would be an experiment. This would be to take Total War further into the modern period than it's ever been before. Yeah,
the furthest forward they've gone is like Napoleon, right?
No, that would be Fall of the Samurai.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, yeah, because that was like late 1800s, right?
Mid to late 1800s,
okay, cool.
For sure. But obviously this would take us right into the 20th century, but it would focus nicely on a conflict that's limited in space and time. Vietnam War lasted about 20 years, focused on one territory, and there'd be options or scope for international politics being at play as well. You can look at maybe the pressure of the great powers like the States and the Soviet Union and all the interests they had tied up in the area.
There's a lot of different stuff you can bring into this, and maybe one of the problems with it is maybe isn't enough factions, but I think you could build stuff out of it, and it is definitely, it fits perfectly what they've said they want this to be. What it maybe doesn't fit is the idea that perhaps they want to make these games a little faster, maybe they want to reuse assets so that they don't have to design quite so much stuff. It would probably involve a lot more systems because they need to make guns and tanks and helicopters and all that other stuff. Yeah, exactly. But it does fit it perfectly beyond that. Similarly, number 3, Persia versus Greece. This is kind of ancient world type stuff.
Yeah, going back to the ancient world, like much more in Total War's sort of traditional wheelhouse. But I don't think they've ever looked at this particular period. Persia versus Greece would be, so there were 2 attempts by Persia to invade Greece between 492 and 479 BC. So those 2 wars fit nicely in the sort of timescale that they're thinking. The Persians were, of course, repelled by an alliance of Greek city-states, including Athens and Sparta, so plenty of factions to work with. And, of course, it culminated famously in the Battle of Thermopylae, where Leonidas famously, as immortalized in that historically accurate film 300.
My favourite historically
held
accurate.
Held out wave after wave against Persian immortals.
Practically a documentary.
Yeah, practically. So that'd be good fun.
I mean, that would be good fun, right? And I think there's there's a lot of scope there where you can just have all the countries in between and all the rest of it. So number 2, War of the Roses.
Yeah.
I mean, this would just be a remake of Medieval at this point, right?
Well, I mean,
very focused.
This is why I'm especially excited about the possibility, at least, of this one. It's been far too long since Medieval 2. Let's have another European medieval Total War episode. So the Wars of the Roses, obviously the powder keg moment here is the succession to the English crown. These wars lasted 30 years, saw dozens of English lords pledge allegiance to either the houses of Lancaster or York. So lots of factions, lots of politicking, and of course, famously, it partially inspired Game of Thrones, which is where, again, the politicking...
I was going to say, isn't there a bit at the end where a girl rides on dragon into London, isn't that?
That was directly lifted from it,
exactly. So, I mean, you get that to look forward to as well, and then they've got some reuse from Warhammer there.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think that one does seem very likely to me. That seems very history nerd,
it's basically perfect for it.
I think that one's very likely. However, up at number 1, American Civil War, this seems just like super easy.
Well, there's been we bring this up because a lot of people were talking about the possibility of the American Civil War in for the next historical
as a proper game. Full scope one.
All we know about the next historical Total War is that it'll be in a period or a setting that Creative Assembly haven't tackled yet. We've hardly seen any of America. A little bit in Empire Total War, and that's about it as far as I know or remember.
Sure.
But the American Civil War, it seems a little bit too focused in scope for the next big historical Total War game, but it's perfect for this, according to CA's brief, right? Yeah. Roughly the same sort of period in history as Fall of the Samurai, so we know they're not afraid to tackle mid-19th century. The war itself did only last 4 years, which is my concern. But we could focus in on the timescale. So Napoleon Total War only had 24 turns in a year, right? We could do that. We could have a similar sort of speed in the game in terms of the turns that it takes, or we could even dial in closer to sort of 1 turn a week. Then you've got enough actual in-game time to span those 4 years.
And while again there are 2 major sides, you could split them up. You could have different states. You could have up to 51 factions there, but whether they would end up doing that. They could split it into areas and part of North America. You could have Canada in there or whoever was up there at the time.
Obviously, plenty of foreign powers had a stake in it. So
and plenty of kind of world politics again in that seems like it would fit similar to Vietnam, but without all the problems of having to redesign lots of kind of fundamental bits of the game. That's what we think. Please let us know in the comments if there's one that you think we've missed that you think this could hit very well. Do remember that this is purely for historical stuff, so they're not going to be doing this for your sadly favourite franchise. Don't expect the Lord of the Rings one anytime soon, as much as we wish it would happen. Thanks very much for joining us. Do hit like if you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe for more, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.